Luna arrived on a cold Thursday morning in November. The horse trailer pulled into Jake's driveway just after sunrise, followed by Emily's truck. Jake had been awake since 4, nervous about whether he was making the right decision. The mare looked even more fragile in daylight than she had in the sanctuary barn. Her ribs still showed despite 2 weeks of regular feeding, and her eyes held the same wary fear Jake remembered. She trembled as they led her from the trailer to the stall Jake had prepared in the quietest corner of his barn. She did okay on the drive, Emily said, watching Luna explore her new surroundings. No major panic, just typical stress. Jake had spent 2 days preparing for Luna's arrival. He had moved his calmest horses to the stalls closest to hers, hoping their peaceful presence would help her settle. He had also stocked up on her favorite treats and made sure the stall was as comfortable as possible. "What's our timeline?" Jake asked as they watched Luna investigate her new home. "No pressure for quick results. The important thing is building trust. Everything else comes after that." Emily stayed for most of the morning, observing Luna's behavior and discussing rehabilitation strategies with Jake. As the day went on, Jake found himself as interested in watching Emily as he was in working with the horse. She moved with quiet confidence around animals, never pushing, always reading their signals before acting. "I should let you get settled into your routine," Emily said around noon. "But I'll check in every few days if that's okay." "More than okay. Luna's going to need professional guidance." Emily smiled. "I wasn't just talking about Luna." After she left, Jake spent the afternoon sitting near Luna's stall, letting her get used to his presence. The mare watched him constantly but showed no signs of aggression. Progress. Over the next week, Jake established a routine with Luna. Every morning and evening, he would sit outside her stall for 30 minutes, sometimes talking quietly, sometimes just being present. He brought his coffee, his paperwork, his phone calls. Luna became part of his daily rhythm. Emily came by twice during that first week, once alone and once with Dr. Peterson to check Luna's physical recovery. Each time, she stayed a little longer than strictly necessary, and Jake found excuses to extend her visits. "She's responding well to you," Emily observed on her second visit. "Look how she watches you." That's engagement, not fear. Jake could see the difference too. Luna's ears were forward more often, and she had started approaching the front of her stall when she heard his voice. Small steps, but meaningful ones. "How long before I can try touching her?" Jake asked. "Let her decide. When she's ready, she'll tell you." That moment came on a sunny Saturday morning. Jake was sitting in his usual spot, drinking coffee and checking emails on his phone, when he became aware that Luna was standing right at the stall door. She stretched her neck toward him, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. Jake slowly set down his coffee and phone. Moving carefully, he stood and approached the stall. Luna didn't retreat. For the first time since her arrival, she let Jake reach through the bars and touch her forehead. Her coat was soft despite her poor condition, and Jake felt the familiar satisfaction of connecting with a frightened animal. Luna leaned into his touch slightly, a gesture of acceptance that made Jake's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Good girl," he murmured. "You're safe here." He called Emily immediately to share the breakthrough. She arrived within an hour, excitement clear in her voice and manner. "This is wonderful," she said, watching Luna accept Jake's touch without fear. "She's made more progress in 10 days than she did in 2 weeks at the sanctuary." "What's next?" "Keep building trust. When she's comfortable with you touching her through the stall bars, we'll try going inside with her." They celebrated the milestone by having lunch together at Jake's kitchen table. The meal stretched into the afternoon as their conversation ranged from horses to family to dreams for the future. "But then, I met you and I realized I was tired of being alone." Emily's smile was warm and genuine. "I was hoping you'd say that. What about you? Why did you really ask for my help?" "Because Dr. Peterson said you were the best. But also because when he described you, you sounded like someone I wanted to meet." "What did he say about me?" "That you were honest, patient, and loyal to a fault. That you had a gift with animals because you understood what it felt like to be hurt." Jake felt exposed by the description, but also strangely relieved. Emily had come into this knowing who he was, what his life was like. She wasn't expecting him to be something he wasn't. "Is that accurate?" Emily asked gently. "Probably more than I'd like to admit." They were standing close now, the lunch dishes forgotten on the counter. Jake could smell Emily's shampoo, something light and floral that reminded him of spring. "Jake," Emily said softly. "Yeah, I'd like to kiss you, if that's okay." Jake felt his heart stop, then start again double time. "Yeah, that's okay." The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, then deeper as they both relaxed into it. Jake couldn't remember the last time a simple kiss had affected him so strongly. When they finally broke apart, Emily smiled up at him. "I've been wanting to do that since our first dinner. Why didn't you?" "I wanted to be sure you were ready. That we both were ready." Jake understood what she meant. This felt different from his past relationships. Less desperate, more grounded, built on friendship and mutual respect rather than just physical attraction or loneliness. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, working with Luna and talking about everything and nothing. When evening came, Emily didn't make excuses to leave early. They cooked dinner together, and Jake found himself marveling at how natural it felt to have her in his kitchen. "I should probably head home," Emily said around 9 o'clock, but she made no move to get up from the couch where they were sitting. "You could stay," Jake said carefully. "I mean, if you want to. No pressure." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I'd like that. But I want to take this slow, Jake. I don't want to mess up whatever this is we're building." "Neither do I." She stayed in the guest room that night, but they had breakfast together the next morning, and Jake couldn't remember when a simple meal had felt so comfortable and right. Over the following weeks, Emily became a regular presence at the ranch. She would stop by after work to check on Luna, often staying for dinner, and sometimes overnight in the guest room. They were taking things slow, but Jake could feel something solid building between them. Luna's progress accelerated as she learned to trust Jake completely. Within a month, he was able to enter her stall safely. Within 6 weeks, he could brush her and handle her hooves. The transformation was remarkable, but it was also gradual enough that Jake could see each small step forward. "She's going to make a wonderful riding horse for someone," Emily said one afternoon as they watched Luna trot freely around the corral. "Look at that movement. She's got natural grace. Think she'll ever get over the fear completely? She'll always be more sensitive than a horse that wasn't traumatized. But with the right owner, someone patient and gentle, she could have a full, happy life." Jake nodded, but the thought of Luna leaving his ranch left him feeling oddly hollow. The mare had become part of his daily routine, part of his life. "What happens when she's ready?" he asked. "We find her a good home. Someone who understands her history and can give her the care she needs." "What if I want to keep her?" Emily looked surprised. "Really? She's not exactly a working ranch horse." "No, but I don't know. Special, I guess. We've been through something together." Emily's smile was understanding. "You've both been healing, haven't you?" Jake realized she was right. Working with Luna had given him something he hadn't known he was missing. Purpose beyond the daily routine of ranch work. A sense of making a real difference in another living being's life. "Would that be okay? Keeping her? It's your ranch, Jake. And honestly, I can't think of a better home for her." December brought the first serious snow of the season. Jake had always loved winter on the ranch, the way the snow transformed the landscape into something clean and stark and beautiful. But this year felt different. This year, he wasn't facing the long months of isolation alone. Emily had officially moved some of her things into the guest room, though she still maintained her apartment in town. It was a gradual transition, testing how their lives fit together without rushing into anything permanent. Jake discovered that living with Emily was easier than he had expected. She understood ranch life, respected his work schedules, and never complained about early mornings or the smell of horses on his clothes. In return, he learned to accommodate her veterinary emergencies and late-night calls. "I love watching you work," Emily said one evening as they sat by the fireplace. She had spent the day helping Jake with routine health checks on the horses, and he had been struck again by her natural competence with animals. "What do you mean? You have this calmness with them, this patience. Even the difficult ones trust you eventually." "Same could be said about you." Emily laughed. "I don't think I'm nearly as patient as you are. I'm not talking about horses." She looked puzzled, so Jake continued. "You were patient with me. Didn't push, didn't demand more than I was ready to give. Let me set the pace. That's because I could see you were worth waiting for." The words hit Jake harder than he expected. For years, he had felt like he was asking too much of the women in his life. Too much isolation, too much commitment to a lifestyle they couldn't understand. Emily made him feel like those things weren't flaws to be overcome, but simply part of who he was. "Emily," he said carefully, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him fully, giving him her complete attention. "I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I already have fallen in love with you." Emily's face lit up with a smile that made Jake's heart race. "I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have since that first dinner. But I was afraid to admit it." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of wanting something too much. Afraid of getting hurt again." Jake understood that fear intimately. And now I think some things are worth the risk. They made love that night for the first time, and Jake marveled at how right it felt. Not desperate or urgent like some of his past relationships, but gentle and sure and full of promise. Afterward, as Emily slept curled against his side, Jake lay awake looking out the window at the snow-covered pastures. For the first time in years, the winter didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like a season of rest before new growth. The morning brought a crisis that tested their new relationship in ways Jake hadn't expected. Emily's phone rang at 5 a.m. with news of an emergency at one of the larger ranches across the county. A barn fire had injured several horses, and they needed all available veterinary help. "I have to go," Emily said, already reaching for her clothes. "I know. Be careful. It could be an all-day thing, maybe longer depending on how bad the injuries are. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back." Emily paused in the middle of getting dressed and looked at him with something like wonder. "You really mean that, don't you? You're not upset that I'm leaving?" "Emily, this is your job. It's who you are. I wouldn't want you to change that." She kissed him hard before leaving, and Jake realized that Sarah and the others had never looked at him that way, with gratitude for understanding instead of resentment for time apart. Emily was gone for 2 days. In the past, Jake would have used the time to catch up on ranch work and enjoy the solitude. Instead, he found himself checking his phone constantly and looking forward to her calls with updates. When she finally returned home, exhausted and smelling like smoke and antiseptic, Jake had dinner waiting and a hot bath drawn. "3 horses lost," she said as she soaked in the tub. "But we saved 7 that could have died. It was worth it, but it was hard. Yeah, sometimes this job breaks your heart." Jake understood that feeling. Ranch life was full of losses that couldn't be prevented, animals that couldn't be saved despite your best efforts. "What helps?" he asked. "This. Coming home to you. Having someone who understands why I do what I do." Jake felt something settle into place inside his chest. Home. Emily had called the ranch home. Spring came early that year, with warm weather melting the snow by mid-March. Luna was fully recovered by then, both physically and emotionally. She had grown into a beautiful horse, filled out and glossy-coated, with none of the fearfulness that had marked her arrival. "Look at her," Emily said as they watched Luna gallop around the pasture with Thunder and the other horses. "You'd never know she'd been traumatized." "She still has her moments," Jake said. "Loud noises still spook her more than they should. And she doesn't like men wearing hats for some reason. But overall, she's a success story. You should be proud." Jake was proud, but more than that, he was grateful. Working with Luna had taught him something about healing, about patience, about the way trust could be rebuilt slowly and carefully. "Jake," Emily said, taking his hand as they leaned against the fence. "I want to talk to you about something." Jake felt a familiar stab of anxiety. In his experience, conversations that started that way didn't end well. "Okay, I've been thinking about making some changes. To my practice, I mean." "What kind of changes?" "Dr. Peterson has been talking about fully retiring. He's offered to sell me his practice. All of it. The small animal clinic in town, the large animal work, everything." Jake nodded slowly. "That's a big opportunity. It would mean I'd be here permanently. Not just visiting, but really building a life in Willow Creek. Is that what you want?" Emily was quiet for a moment, watching Luna graze in the afternoon sunshine. "A year ago, I would have said I wanted to keep my options open. Stay flexible, don't put down too deep roots. But now I think I've found where I belong." Jake felt his heart rate accelerate. "You mean the town? The practice?" Emily turned to look at him directly. I mean here. With you. On this ranch. Emily, I know it's a big step. And I know you've been hurt before by people who said they could handle this life, and then changed their minds. But I'm not them, Jake. This isn't me trying to fit into someone else's dream. This is me choosing my own. Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching her face for any sign of uncertainty or doubt. He found none. What about your apartment in town? I could give it up. Move out here completely. And if you get tired of the isolation, the long winters. Emily smiled. Then we'll deal with it together. Jake, I'm not promising I'll never have doubts or difficult days. But I am promising I won't run away at the first sign of challenge. Jake felt the last of his defenses crumble. This was what he had been afraid to hope for. Someone who chose his life not because they were trying to please him, but because it genuinely fit who they were. I love you, he said, pulling her into his arms. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. They were married in June, on the ranch, with Luna and Thunder and all the other horses as witnesses. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, but it felt exactly right to Jake. Danny flew in from Seattle and couldn't stop grinning. I never thought I'd see the day, he told Jake during the reception. You look happier than I've ever seen you. I feel it. She's good for you. Really good for you. Jake looked across the yard to where Emily was talking with Frank Hawkins and some of the other neighbors. She was wearing a simple white dress and cowboy boots, looking perfectly at home in the setting. As if she sensed his attention, she looked up and smiled at him. The kind of smile that promised a lifetime of shared mornings and quiet evenings and work done together. Yeah, Jake said. She really is. Later, after the guests had gone home and they were cleaning up in the kitchen, Emily found a moment to check on Luna. The mare was grazing peacefully in the pasture, surrounded by the other horses. She's come so far, Emily said, watching Luna through the window. We all have. Emily turned to smile at him. No regrets about giving up your bachelor life. Jake pretended to consider the question seriously. Well, I did enjoy eating standing up at the counter and never having to share the TV remote. I promise to let you watch the Weather Channel sometimes. In that case, I think I can adjust. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their horses graze in the evening light. Jake thought about all the years he had stood in this same spot alone, convinced that this was enough, that the ranch and the animals and the work were all he needed. He had been wrong, but he had also been right in a way. The ranch was enough, but it was even better when shared with someone who understood why he loved it. Emily hadn't changed his life so much as she had completed it, added the missing piece he hadn't known he was looking for. Outside, Luna lifted her head and looked toward the house, as if sensing their attention. For a moment, her eyes met Jake's through the window, and he could swear he saw contentment there. Recognition. The look of an animal that had found its home. Jake understood the feeling completely. 6 months later, Emily was officially Dr. Emily Morrison, owner of the Willow Creek Veterinary Practice and full-time resident of the Morrison Ranch. She had converted one of the outbuildings into a clinic for emergency cases, and Jake had helped her set up a proper veterinary facility that could handle everything from routine checkups to surgical procedures. Their life had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Early mornings checking animals, days spent on their respective work, evenings together planning and dreaming about the future. Emily had ideas about expanding the rescue program, taking in more traumatized horses like Luna. Jake found himself excited about the prospect of their ranch becoming a place of healing for animals that had been hurt. You know what I realized? Emily said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. What's that? I spent years thinking I needed to choose between love and work, between relationships and career. But with you, they're all the same thing. This is our work, our home, our life together. Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had always known the ranch was part of him, but he had thought that meant he had to choose between the land and love. Emily had shown him it was possible to have both, that the right person would see his devotion to this place as part of what made him who he was. I have something for you, Jake said, reaching into his shirt pocket. What's the occasion? No occasion, just something I've been thinking about. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a key. Emily looked puzzled. What's this for? It's the key to the ranch. The original key my great-grandfather had made when he first bought the property. Jake, I already have a key to the house. This isn't about the house. It's about making this place officially yours too. I want to add your name to the deed. Emily's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely serious. This ranch is our home now. It should belong to both of us. Emily was quiet for a long moment, turning the old key over in her hands. Your family has owned this land for 4 generations, she said finally. And now it'll be owned by the Morrisons for a 5th generation. That includes you. Emily leaned over and kissed him, soft and sure and full of promise. Thank you, she whispered against his lips, for trusting me with this. Thank you for making it feel like home instead of just a place to work. As the stars came out overhead, Jake thought about the night a year and a half ago when he had sat in this same spot convinced that love wasn't in the cards for someone like him. He had been prepared to spend his life alone, devoted to the land and the animals, but never sharing that devotion with another person. Emily had changed everything, not by asking him to be different, but by seeing who he already was and choosing to build a life around it. She had shown him that the right love didn't require sacrifice or compromise of the things that mattered most. The right love enhanced them, made them better, gave them deeper meaning. Luna whinnied softly from the pasture, probably calling to Thunder or one of the other horses. The sound made Jake smile. Even the traumatized mare had learned to trust again, had found her place in the herd. Sometimes healing happened slowly, one careful step at a time. Sometimes it required patience and faith and the willingness to believe that better days were possible. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it happened with someone who understood that the best kind of love didn't ask you to choose between your heart and your home. It gave you both. Doctor. Emily Chun called at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning. Jake had been expecting it, but the sound of his phone ringing still made him pause in the middle of checking the horses' water troughs. Mr. Morrison? This is Dr. Chun. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me. Her voice was clear and confident, with just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. Professional, like her text messages, but warmer than he had expected. Call me Jake. What can I do for you? I have a rescue case that's proving challenging. A 3-year-old mare named Luna. She was seized from a neglect situation about 2 weeks ago. Physically, she's recovering well, but she won't let anyone approach her. Dr. Peterson suggested you might have some insights. Jake leaned against the fence, watching Thunder graze in the morning sunlight. What kind of neglect are we talking about? Starvation, mainly. She was kept in a small pen with no shelter and minimal food. The owner also used harsh training methods. Whips, chains, that sort of thing. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had seen abuse cases before, and they always made his blood boil. People who hurt animals were the worst kind of coward. Where is she now? We have temporary boarding at the sanctuary outside town, but they can't keep her much longer. I need to find a place where she can be rehabilitated properly. Somewhere quiet, with someone who understands trauma in horses. And Dr. Peterson thought I could help. He said you have a gift with difficult horses, that you're patient and understand their psychology. Jake was quiet for a moment. The last thing he needed was another responsibility, especially one that would require emotional investment. But the image of a frightened horse stuck in his mind. Can I see her? Of course. When would be convenient? This afternoon? Around 2? Perfect. I'll meet you at the sanctuary. Thank you, Jake. I really appreciate this. After ending the call, Jake found himself wondering what Dr. Chen looked like. Her voice suggested someone young, maybe around his age. Professional, but not cold. He caught himself speculating and shook his head. It didn't matter what she looked like. This was about helping a horse, nothing more. The Willow Creek Animal Sanctuary was a 30-minute drive from the ranch. Jake had donated money to them over the years, but had never visited. The facility was larger than he had expected, with several barns and multiple fenced areas for different animals. He parked his truck and looked around for someone who might be Dr. Chun. A woman emerged from the main barn, and Jake felt his breath catch slightly. She was Asian American, probably in her early 30s, with long black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans, boots, and a veterinary jacket that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. Dark brown and intelligent, but also kind. The kind of eyes that missed nothing but judged gently. Jake. She walked toward him with an easy stride, hand extended. I'm Emily Chan. Her handshake was firm and confident. Thanks for coming. Luna's in the back barn. Fair warning, she's still pretty skittish. They walked together toward a smaller barn behind the main building. Emily moved with the comfortable efficiency of someone who spent her days around animals. Jake found himself stealing glances at her profile. Dr. Peterson tells me you grew up here, Emily said as they walked. Fourth generation. My great-grandfather bought the land in 1923. That must be nice, having that kind of continuity. I grew up moving around a lot. Army family. What brought you to Willow Creek? Emily smiled. Honestly, I was burned out on emergency animal hospitals in big cities. Too much trauma, not enough time to really help. When Dr. Peterson offered me the chance to take over his large animal practice, it seemed like exactly what I needed. They reached the barn, and Emily led him to a stall at the far end. There she is. Jake looked through the bars and saw Luna for the first time. She was a beautiful horse, or would be once she filled out. Bay-colored with a dark mane and tail, and intelligent eyes that held too much fear for such a young animal. She stood in the far corner of her stall, as far from the door as possible. How long has she been like this? Since they brought her in. She'll eat if we leave the food and go away, but any human presence sends her into panic mode. I've tried sedation for examinations, but I can't keep drugging her indefinitely. Jake studied the horse's posture. Head low, ears back, ready to flee or fight. Classic trauma response. Can I go in? Emily looked surprised. I wouldn't recommend it. She's unpredictable, and she's already injured 2 people. What kind of injuries? Kicked one handler in the ribs. Bit another on the arm. Nothing too serious, but enough to make everyone cautious. Jake nodded. Fear-based aggression was common in abuse cases. The horse wasn't mean, just terrified and trying to protect herself. I'd like to try, if that's okay. I'll be careful. Emily hesitated, then nodded. I'll stay close by. Jake opened the stall door slowly and stepped inside. Luna immediately pressed herself further into the corner, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. Jake sat down on the ground about 6 feet away and made himself as small and non-threatening as possible. Hey there, beautiful, he said in the same low, calm voice he used with all frightened animals. Nobody's going to hurt you. Luna watched him warily but didn't try to attack or escape. Jake sat perfectly still, continuing to talk in soothing tones. He told her about his ranch, about Thunder and the other horses, about the mountains and the grass and the wide open spaces where a horse could run free. After about 10 minutes, Luna's ears came forward slightly, still alert, but curious now instead of purely terrified. Jake slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of apple he had brought for Thunder. He held it out on his palm and waited. Luna's nostrils flared as she caught the scent. Food was always a powerful motivator, but it would also require her to trust him enough to come closer. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Luna took a tentative step forward. Then, another. Jake held perfectly still, letting her make the choice. When she finally reached his hand and took the apple, Jake felt a familiar surge of satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. That's incredible, Emily whispered from outside the stall. She hasn't approached anyone willingly since she got here. Jake slowly stood up, moving carefully so as not to startle Luna. She watched him but didn't retreat. She's smart, Jake said. Smart horses are actually easier to rehabilitate because they can learn to distinguish between people who might hurt them and people who won't. How long do you think it would take to get her back to normal? Jake considered. Depends on how much damage was done and how committed we are to the process. Could be months. Could be longer. Emily nodded thoughtfully. The sanctuary can't keep her indefinitely. They need the space for incoming cases. What are the alternatives? Emily's face darkened. If she can't be rehabilitated, she'll have to be put down. Too dangerous to adopt out. And no one wants to take responsibility for an aggressive horse. The words hit Jake harder than he expected. Luna was young, beautiful, and intelligent. Her only crime was being hurt by people who should have protected her. I could take her, Jake heard himself say. Emily looked surprised. Really? It's a big commitment. She'll need daily attention, professional guidance. I have the facilities. And the time. Dr. Peterson mentioned you're very busy with your ranch. Jake shrugged. I can make time for something important. They worked out the details over the next hour. Jake would take Luna to his ranch within the week. Emily would provide ongoing veterinary support and guidance. They would work together to develop a rehabilitation plan. As they walked back to their vehicles, Jake found himself reluctant to end the conversation. Would you like to see the ranch before we move, Luna? He asked. Make sure the facilities meet your standards? Emily smiled. I'd love that. When would be convenient? Tomorrow afternoon? Around 4. Perfect. That evening, Jake found himself cleaning the ranch house more thoroughly than he had in months. He told himself it was just common courtesy, preparing for a professional visit. But he also found himself wondering what Emily would think of the place. He had never brought a woman to the ranch for purely professional reasons. Sarah and the others had come as girlfriends, dates, potential partners. This was different. Emily was coming as a veterinarian, a colleague. It should have felt more comfortable, but somehow it didn't. The next day dragged by. Jake caught himself checking his watch repeatedly and had to force himself to focus on ranch work. Carlos noticed his distraction during lunch. You seem jumpy today, boss. Everything okay? New vet is coming to look at the facilities. Want to make sure everything looks good. Pete grinned. New vet, huh? What's he like? She's professional, Jake said carefully. Knows her business. Tommy looked up with interest. She pretty. Jake felt his face warm. That's not relevant to her qualifications as a veterinarian. All three ranch hands exchanged meaningful looks. Jake realized he had walked into that one. Just focus on your work, he said. But he couldn't keep the embarrassment out of his voice. At exactly 4 o'clock, Emily's truck pulled into the driveway. Jake watched from the barn as she got out and looked around, taking in the ranch with professional interest. She was dressed similarly to the day before, but something seemed different. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, and she moved with less hurry, more relaxation. This is beautiful, she said as Jake walked up to meet her. How many acres? 3,000. Come on, I'll show you where Luna would be staying. Jake led her through the facilities, pointing out the different pastures, the barn setup, the medical equipment he kept on hand for basic veterinary care. Emily asked good questions and seemed impressed with what she saw. You really know what you're doing, she said as they finished the tour. Luna would be lucky to recover here. They were standing by the main corral, watching Thunder and the other horses graze in the evening light. The setting sun painted everything golden, and Jake realized Emily was watching the horses with the same appreciation he felt every day. It must be incredible living here, she said. So peaceful. It can be. It can also be isolating. Emily glanced at him. Do you ever get lonely? The question was so direct, so honest, that Jake found himself answering truthfully. Sometimes, especially in winter. I can imagine. I grew up in cities, so I'm used to people and noise and activity. But there's something about this place, it feels like you could think here. Really think. Jake looked at her profile, surprised by her insight. Most visitors found the ranch either boring or intimidating. Few understood its deeper appeal. Would you like to stay for dinner? The invitation was out before he could stop himself. Nothing fancy, just beef stew. But it's homemade. Emily smiled. I'd like that. They ate at Jake's kitchen table, talking about horses and ranching and veterinary medicine. Emily was easy to talk to, with a way of asking questions that made Jake want to share more than he usually did. She told him about growing up as an army brat, living on bases around the world, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. That's why this place appeals to me, she said, gesturing toward the window where the mountains were visible in the distance. The permanence of it. The way your family has been here for generations. My brother thinks I'm crazy for staying. He lives in Seattle now. Thinks I should sell the ranch and move to the city. What do you think? Jake was quiet for a moment. I think some people are meant for cities, and some are meant for places like this. I've always known which kind I am. But you've never tested that theory. What do you mean? Have you ever lived anywhere else? Even for a short time? Jake shook his head. Left Montana exactly 3 times in my life. Twice for cattle shows, once for my cousin's wedding in Denver. Never felt the urge to stay away. Emily smiled. That's actually kind of amazing. Most people spend their whole lives trying to figure out where they belong. You've always known. After dinner, they sat on the front porch drinking coffee and watching the stars come out. The conversation had moved from professional to personal, and Jake found himself sharing things he rarely talked about with anyone. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emily said during a comfortable silence. "Sure. Dr. Peterson mentioned you're not married. Have you ever been close?" Jake felt his defenses start to rise, then forced them down. Emily wasn't asking out of idle curiosity. Her tone was gentle, genuinely interested. "Few times. Never worked out. Because of the ranch. Partly. Women say they understand what this life is like, but understanding and living it are different things. The isolation gets to people. The long hours, the fact that animals sometimes come before plans." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "It would take a certain kind of person. What about you? Ever been married?" "Engaged once, about 3 years ago. To another veterinarian, actually. We met in vet school." "What happened?" "He got offered a position at a prestigious animal hospital in Los Angeles. Amazing opportunity, too good to pass up. He assumed I'd follow him. But you didn't. I was just starting to figure out what I really wanted from my career. The big city emergency medicine was burning me out, and I knew I wanted something different. He couldn't understand why I'd choose rural practice over prestige and money. So you chose your career over the relationship." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I chose authenticity over convenience. Turns out those aren't always the same thing." Jake understood exactly what she meant. How many times had he been told he was choosing the ranch over love? But it wasn't that simple. The ranch wasn't just his job or his home. It was part of who he was. "I should probably head home," Emily said as the clock in the hallway chimed 9. "Early day tomorrow." Jake felt a stab of disappointment. The evening had been the most enjoyable he'd had in months. But he walked her to her truck and waited while she gathered her things. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "And for agreeing to help Luna. I really think you're her best chance. When do you want to move her?" "Day after tomorrow. That gives me time to prepare her transport paperwork." "Sounds good." Emily hesitated with her hand on the truck door. "Jake, I hope this isn't too forward, but would you like to have dinner again sometime? When it's not about Luna, I mean." Jake felt his heart rate increase. He had been hoping she would ask, but he hadn't expected the direct approach. "I'd like that," he said. "Good. I'll call you after we get Luna settled." Jake watched her taillights disappear down the driveway, then stood on the porch for a long time looking up at the stars. For the first time in 8 months, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with cattle or horses or ranch work. He was looking forward to seeing Emily Chin again. The next morning brought a reality check in the form of a call from his brother Danny. "How's the hermit life?" Danny asked cheerfully. "Still talking to horses more than humans?" "Actually, I met someone yesterday." There was a pause. "You met someone? Like a woman someone?" "She's a veterinarian. She's helping me with a horse rescue project." "Jake, that's great. What's she like?" Jake found himself describing Emily, and realized as he talked how much attention he had been paying to details. The way she moved, her laugh, the way she asked thoughtful questions. "She sounds wonderful," Danny said when Jake finished. "Are you going to ask her out?" "She already asked me." "Even better. See, I told you good things would happen if you put yourself out there." Jake didn't bother pointing out that he hadn't put himself out there. Emily had come to him through work. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe the important thing was that he was open to the possibility for the first time in months. "Don't get ahead of yourself," Jake warned. "It's just dinner." Famous last words, Danny said with a laugh. "I'm happy for you, big brother. It's about time." After the call, Jake found himself in an unusually good mood. Even the prospect of spending the day repairing fence line seemed less tedious than usual. Carlos noticed the change right away. "You're humming," Carlos observed as they loaded fence posts into the truck. "I hum sometimes. Boss, I've worked here for 15 years. You never hum." Pete and Tommy had also noticed the change in Jake's demeanor. By lunch, all 3 ranch hands were making pointed comments about how nice it was to see the boss in a good mood. Jake realized he had let his guard down more than he intended. The problem with working closely with the same people for years was that they noticed everything. But he also realized he didn't mind their teasing as much as he usually would have. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind his work and start living a little. The thought scared him, but it also felt like a possibility worth exploring. Jake Morrison had never been good with words, but he was damn good with horses. At 34, he could break a wild Mustang in 2 days, fix a fence in an hour, and spot a sick cow from half a mile away. What he couldn't do was keep a woman happy for more than 6 months. The sun was setting over the Montana plains as Jake guided his horse Thunder back to the ranch. The sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple, the kind of sunset that tourists paid good money to see. Jake barely noticed anymore. He had seen 10,000 sunsets just like this one, and he would probably see 10,000 more, alone. His phone buzzed in his shirt pocket. Jake pulled it out and saw a text from his younger brother Danny, who lived in Seattle now, working for some tech company. The message was simple. "How's the dating life, big brother?" Jake almost laughed. Dating life. As if he had won. He typed back. "Same as always. Horses don't break your heart." Danny replied immediately. "Maybe try dating humans instead of horses." Jake put the phone away without responding. Danny meant well, but he didn't understand. City people never understood what it was like out here. The isolation, the long days, the way the wind could make you feel like the only person left on Earth. The Morrison Ranch had been in Jake's family for 4 generations. His great-grandfather had bought the land in 1923 with money he saved from working the railroad. Back then, it was just 500 acres of grass and dreams. Now it stretched across 3,000 acres, home to 200 head of cattle and 12 horses. Jake's father had run the ranch until a heart attack took him 5 years ago. His mother had lasted 2 years after that before the loneliness got to her too. Not loneliness exactly, but the kind of sadness that settles into your bones when the person you shared your life with is gone. Now Jake ran the place with help from 3 ranch hands. Carlos, who had worked here since Jake was 12. Pete, a former rodeo rider with a bad back and worse jokes. And Tommy, fresh out of high school and full of energy that reminded Jake of himself 20 years ago. The barn smelled like hay and leather and horse sweat. Jake unsaddled Thunder and gave him a good brushing. The horse leaned into the brush, enjoying the attention. Animals were honest. They didn't promise things they couldn't deliver. They didn't lie about their feelings or change their minds without warning. "You're a good boy," Jake murmured to Thunder. "Better than most humans I know." Thunder snorted and nudged Jake's shoulder with his nose. After feeding the horses, Jake walked to the main house. It was a 2-story farmhouse built in 1947, white with green shutters and a wraparound porch. His grandmother had planted rose bushes along the front, and somehow they still bloomed every summer despite years of neglect. The house felt too big for one person. Jake had thought about moving into the foreman's cabin, but something stopped him. Maybe it was respect for his parents' memory. Maybe it was hope that someday he wouldn't be living alone. Either way, he rattled around the empty rooms like a ghost haunting his own life. He heated up leftover chili in the microwave and ate standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the mountains in the distance. The Rockies stood like ancient guardians, unchanged and unchanging. Jake envied their permanence. His mind wandered to Sarah, his last girlfriend. She had been a teacher in the nearest town, Willow Creek, population 2,847. They had met at Murphy's Bar during the annual Founders' Day celebration. Sarah was pretty in a quiet way, with brown hair and green eyes that lit up when she laughed. For 4 months, things had been good. Sarah would drive out to the ranch on weekends. She liked the horses and didn't mind the smell of cattle. She even helped with some of the lighter chores, feeding chickens and collecting eggs. Jake had started thinking maybe this time would be different. Then, winter came. Winter in Montana wasn't like winter other places. It was a living thing, hungry and mean. The snow could pile 8 feet deep. The wind could cut through your thickest coat like it was made of paper. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles away, and in a blizzard, 12 miles might as well be 1,200. Sarah lasted until February. One morning she called and said she couldn't do it anymore. The isolation was getting to her. She felt trapped. She needed to be around people, needed civilization, needed more than what Jake could offer. "It's not you," she had said, which was the same thing every woman before her had said. "You're a good man, Jake. But this life, it's not for me." That was 8 months ago. Jake hadn't dated anyone since. Hadn't even tried. What was the point? The ranch would always be here. The isolation would always be here. and he would always choose this life over any other. His phone rang, startling him out of his memories. The caller ID showed his neighbor's name, Frank Hawkins. "Jake, I need a favor," Frank said without preamble. Frank owned the spread to the east, about 8 miles away. He was 73 and stubborn as a mule, but he had been good to Jake's family for decades. "What do you need, Frank?" "Got a horse problem. That black mare of mine, Midnight, she's been acting strange. Won't let anyone near her. Won't eat much. I think she might be sick, but Doc Peterson is out of town for his daughter's wedding." Jake looked at the clock. It was already past 8, and he had planned to catch up on paperwork. But Frank wouldn't call unless it was serious. "I'll be right over," Jake said. The drive to Frank's place took him past the small cemetery where his parents were buried. Jake slowed down as he always did, but he didn't stop. Some nights the grief still hit him like a physical blow, but tonight it was just a dull ache in his chest. Frank's ranch was smaller than Jake's, but well-maintained. Frank took pride in his fences and his buildings. His late wife Martha had insisted on flower gardens around the house, and Frank still tended them even though she had been gone for 3 years. Frank was waiting by the barn, his weathered face creased with worry. At 73, he still moved like a man 20 years younger, but Jake could see the concern in his eyes. "She's in the back stall," Frank said. "Been like this for 2 days." Midnight was a beautiful horse, coal black with a white star on her forehead. She stood in the corner of her stall, head down, barely acknowledging their presence. Jake could see right away that something was wrong. Horses were social animals. They wanted attention, wanted interaction. This withdrawal wasn't normal. Jake opened the stall door slowly and stepped inside. Midnight lifted her head, but didn't move toward him or away. Jake approached carefully, talking in low, soothing tones. "Hey there, beautiful," he said. "What's got you feeling so low?" He ran his hands along her neck and shoulders, checking for injuries or swelling. Her coat felt dull, and she was definitely thinner than she should be. Jake lifted her upper lip to check her gums. They were pale, another bad sign. "Frank, when did she last have a foal?" "About 6 months ago. Little colt named Storm. He's doing fine, out in the main pasture." Jake nodded and continued his examination. He checked her legs, her hooves, felt along her belly. Everything seemed normal physically, but her behavior suggested something deeper was wrong. "I think she's grieving," Jake said finally. Frank looked puzzled. "Grieving? For what?" "Her colt. You said you weaned him 6 months ago?" "Yeah, about that." "Is that too early?" "No, 6 months is normal. But some Maras take it harder than others, especially the first-time mothers. They can get depressed when their babies are taken away." Frank's face softened. "I never thought. I mean, I knew she was attached to Storm, but I figured she'd get over it. Some do, some don't. It's like any mother losing a child, even if it's natural and necessary." Jake spent another 20 minutes with Midnight, just being present, letting her get used to him. Slowly, she began to relax. Her head came up, and she even nuzzled his hand when he offered it. "What can we do?" Frank asked. "Well, medication might help short-term, but what she really needs is purpose. Something to care for again. Do you have any orphan foals in the area? Any horses that need companionship?" Frank thought for a moment. "Actually, there might be something. You remember the Peterson place? Doc Peterson's ranch." "Yeah. His son called me yesterday. They've got a rescue horse coming in next week. Some kind of abuse case. Young mare, probably traumatized. They're looking for a place to rehabilitate her." Jake nodded slowly. "That could work. Midnight might respond well to helping another horse. Give her something to focus on besides missing her colt." "I'll call them tomorrow," Frank said. "Thanks, Jake. I don't know what I would have done." They walked back toward their trucks together. The night was clear and cold, with more stars visible than most people ever saw in their lives. Out here, away from city lights, the sky went on forever. "Jake," Frank said as they reached the driveway. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jake tensed. Frank wasn't usually one for personal conversations. "You ever think about selling the ranch? Moving somewhere with more opportunities?" "What kind of opportunities?" "You know, people, women, a chance to have a family." Jake was quiet for a long moment. This wasn't the first time someone had suggested he leave. His brother Danny brought it up every time they talked. Even some of the guys in town had hinted that maybe he should consider a change. "This is my home," Frank. My family's home. I can't just abandon it. I'm not talking about abandoning it. You could hire a manager, visit on weekends. You're still young. You could start over somewhere. I'm 34. That's not exactly young. It's young enough. Jake, I've watched you grow up. Your parents would want you to be happy. Jake kicked at a stone in the driveway. Who says I'm not happy? Frank gave him a look that suggested he wasn't buying it. When's the last time you took a vacation? When's the last time you went somewhere just for fun? Jake couldn't remember. Maybe that fishing trip with Danny 3 years ago? Even that had been cut short when one of the horses got hurt. The ranch needs me, Jake said. The ranch will be here whether you're happy or miserable. But you've only got one life. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, looking up at the stars. Finally, Frank clapped Jake on the shoulder. Just think about it, son. That's all I'm asking. On the drive home, Jake found himself thinking about Frank's words. Was he really that transparent? Could everyone see his loneliness except him? The truth was, he had thought about leaving. Not seriously, but the idea had crossed his mind during the long winter nights when the wind howled around the house, and he felt like the last person on earth. He could sell the ranch, move to a city, get a regular job, meet people, date, maybe even fall in love with someone who wouldn't run away when things got difficult. But every time he considered it, something held him back. This land was in his blood. His great-grandfather had built something here, something lasting. His father and grandfather had maintained it, improved it, passed it down. Jake was the last Morrison. If he left, 4 generations of work would be gone. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the truck for a few minutes, looking at the house. The porch light was on a timer, casting a warm yellow glow over the front steps. His grandmother's roses were dormant now, waiting for spring. Inside, the house was quiet except for the settling sounds old houses make. Jake checked his email on his laptop and found the usual mix of ranch business and spam. There was a message from a cattle buyer in Denver, another from his feed supplier, and one from Danny with photos of his new apartment. Danny's life looked so different from Jake's. In the photos, Danny was surrounded by friends at some kind of party. Everyone was smiling, drinks in hand, the city lights sparkling through big windows behind them. It looked like a movie, like the kind of life people had in commercials. Jake closed the laptop and went upstairs to his bedroom. The room still had his mother's curtains, blue with tiny flowers. He kept meaning to change them, but somehow he never got around to it. They made the room feel less empty. He lay in bed listening to the wind and thinking about Midnight, the grieving horse. Was that what he was doing? Grieving for something he had lost, or maybe something he had never had. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of horses and empty houses and roads that led nowhere. The next morning brought a crisis that pushed all thoughts of loneliness aside. Jake woke to his phone ringing at 5:30 a.m. It was Carlos, calling from the south pasture. "Boss, we got a problem. That storm last night brought down the fence line by Miller Creek. Half the herd is scattered, and some of them are on the highway." Jake was dressed and out the door in 5 minutes. By the time he reached the damaged fence, Carlos, Pete, and Tommy were already there with their horses, trying to assess the situation. The storm had been worse than Jake realized. A large pine tree had fallen across the fence, taking down nearly 100 yards of wire and posts. The gap was wide enough to drive a truck through. "How many are missing?" Jake asked as he saddled Thunder. "We count about 60 head, Pete said. Most of them headed toward the highway. Tommy's already gone to start turning them back." Jake nodded grimly. Cattle on the highway were a disaster waiting to happen. Not just for the animals, but for any driver who hit a 1,000-pound steer at 60 miles an hour. They spent the next 4 hours chasing cattle. Some had wandered as far as 3 miles from the ranch, drawn by the promise of fresh grass and no fences. Jake found himself grateful for the work, for the immediate problem that required all his attention. By noon, they had most of the cattle back where they belonged. The temporary fence would hold until they could do proper repairs. Jake was dirty, tired, and sweating despite the cool air. "Not bad for a morning's work," Pete said, rolling a cigarette. "Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot better too," Jake replied, looking at the damaged fence line. The repair would take days and cost thousands. Money he had, but not an unlimited supply. Carlos rode up with the last straggler, An old cow named Bertha who had always been more independent than the rest. That's all of them, boss. Nobody hurt, nothing missing. Good work, everyone. Let's head back for lunch. As they rode toward the ranch house, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message. He almost ignored it, but something made him check. The message was from an unknown number with a 406 area code, Montana. Hi, this is Dr. Emily Chun from the Willow Creek Animal Hospital. Dr. Peterson gave me your number. I understand you're very good with horses. I have a situation I could use help with. Would you have time to talk? Jake stared at the message. Dr. Peterson had semi-retired last year, and Jake had heard rumors about a new veterinarian taking over some of his cases. But he hadn't met her yet. He typed back, available this afternoon if it's urgent. Otherwise, tomorrow morning works. The reply came quickly. Tomorrow morning would be perfect. Thank you. I'll call around 9 a.m. if that works. That works. Jake put the phone away, curious despite himself. In his experience, veterinarians fell into two categories: the old-school country vets who understood ranch life, and the newer graduates who knew a lot about medicine but not much about dealing with ranchers. He wondered which kind Dr. Chin would be. That evening, Jake found himself thinking about the text exchange. Something about the straightforward, professional tone appealed to him. No unnecessary words, no games. Just a problem that needed solving and a request for help. He realized he was looking forward to the phone call, which surprised him. It had been a long time since he had looked forward to talking to anyone, especially someone he had never met. But then, again, it was just business. A veterinarian who needed help with a horse. Nothing more than that. Jake fell asleep that night thinking about damaged fences and scattered cattle, but somewhere in his dreams, a voice he had never heard was asking for his help. And for the first time in months, he wanted to say yes.